Thank you for being with us tonight. This meeting has been brought to you in part by
Let Grand Forks International Airport help you start your next vacation off on the right foot. Grand Forks International Airport offers flights to the sunny destinations of Orlando, Las Vegas, and Phoenix on Allegiant, and connections anywhere in the world through Minneapolis-St. Paul on Delta. Forget the hassle of long drives, parking nightmares, and stressful check-ins. The convenience of flying locally means less headaches and more time for you. Grand Forks International Airport, your airport, simply grand.
Know what's in this box? Well, in case your crystal ball is broken, here's a hint. Safe, reliable energy, for starters, but there's also a commitment to this community. See, at Xcel Energy, this is our hometown. So we're not just about making a living here, we're about living here. Oh, I wish I had wings.
In our community, we're always delivering. Xcel Energy, responsible by nature.
Brantley Gilbert returns to Grand Forks. Fired Up Tour 2020 with special guests Chase Rice and Brandon Lay. Alara Center, Saturday, May 2nd. Get tickets now at Ticketmaster.com. The brand new album Fire and Brimstone drops everywhere October 4th. Brantley Gilbert, live in concert. Check more at BrantleyGilbert.com.
Yes, Steve. I don't know which one to be.
I'd like to call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for January 8th, 2020. Roll call.
Budke.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Kuhn.
Here.
Lunsky.
Here.
Matichek.
Here.
Reichert.
Here.
Sandy. Wasvik.
Here. Quorum present. Reading and approval of the minutes from the December 4th meeting, 2019. Mr. Reichert? Move approval. Second. Moved by Mr. Reichert, second by Mr. Budke. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved as presented. Item 3, public hearings. Final approvals, petitions, and minor changes.
3.1 Public Hearing Fast Track Final. Replat of Lots B, C, and D. Block A of the replat of Lot 1, Block 3, and Lot 1. Block 4 and vacated 38th Avenue South adjacent thereto, Columbia Park 33rd re-subdivision.
Mr. Brooks.
Okay, Jane, could you hit the second light down, the button for the lights?
Take roll call?
Yeah.
Yes.
You do your job, I'll do mine. Happy New Year.
So I'll get started. Columbia Road is right here on the plat. Hopefully you can see my cursor on the screen there. Columbia Road and 40th Avenue. We're looking at these three lots right here in the northeast quadrant of that area. This is the office building that was just recently built, the Steffel Nicholas building. Probably didn't say that right still. That's a separate lot. So we're looking at the three lots below that. And it's just a simple replat. They're taking those three lots and making them into two. With that, we are recommending approval on this one as public hearing as well.
Okay, anybody have any questions before, please?
Didn't we have a conversation at one point about where the roads would be going in and out of that development?
So access points?
Yeah.
Yeah, so those will still be on the plat, and they'll show, I think, on the.
So it won't change?
No, I think we're still using those same points. Yeah, the only thing changing is the lot line in between, so we maintain those other points. I know we had concerns about where the road, Headlights would be going on those roads on the backside.
Yep,
We're still
okay.
maintaining those. It's just, on this case, there's going to be a separate owner on this bottom, and they're splitting that here. Access points will still remain the same.
Okay, Mr. Budke?
So as far as that 38th Avenue South that's been vacated,
Yep.
there still shows an access point in the plat, so
Yep.
since
So it'd be
this is-
private roadway coming in.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I will open up the public hearing. Anybody in the audience would like to step up and address item 3.1, please do so at this time. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission. Moved by Mr. Kuhn. Second by Ms. Sandy. Discussion, seeing no hands, vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Item 3.1 carries. 3.2.
Public hearing fast track final. Public hearing fast track final. Replat of Lot 1, Block 1, Perkins 13th Re-subdivision.
Mr. Gingler.
Mr. Wozniak, how are you doing this evening?
Fantastic.
Glad to see you.
Happy New Year.
The property we're looking at is on the northwesterly corner of South Columbia Road and 40th Avenue South. It's kind of hard to see with the audience, but what we're doing is there's one lot that comes from the north and then connects to 40th, and then a single lot that shows the existing clinic that's there. The property owner would like to subdivide one more lot out of it, thereby creating 3 lots. This depiction gives you a little better idea of there's already shared access coming in off of 40th. Now that will continue. So this line, red line in the middle, represents the new lot line. There is an existing storm pond for these areas. It's intended to serve all 3 lots, so they will be revising their internal agreement to make sure all 3 property owners will be a part of the internal access agreement and the storm pond agreement. The only thing different from the plat that was submitted to you in your packets, I did just receive today a minor change of any significance. It's just adding a 30-foot, or I'm sorry, a 20-foot utility easement on the north side that I have circled in red here. So that's really the only difference between what was submitted. It's a pretty basic replat, and I know we've dealt with this property in the past. Just to give you a little history, the green lines here represent the whole swath of the Magellan pipeline. So there's very little that Magellan will allow to occur in that area. So in the future, we may see perhaps some appeals for maybe landscaping or something that's a little bit different than what we would, because again, the property owner has very limited access to this, which, as you can see on the aerial here, it takes up a considerable amount. But for right now, staff is recommending approval of the replat.
All right, any questions from the commission before I send out for the public hearing? Seeing no hands, I'll open the public hearing. Anybody in the audience would like to walk up and address item 3.2, please do so at this time. Seeing no one, close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission. Moved by Ms. Sandy. Second. Second by Mr. Reichert. Any further discussion? Seeing no hands, call for vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? 3-2 passes. 3-3.
Public hearing fast track final. Replat of Lot G, Block 1, Business Park 3rd Re-subdivision.
Mrs. Halford.
Good evening. I'm just going to go along with the theme of the night, and that is we have another simple replat. This is on the south side of the city's business park. We're just looking to subdivide it and set it up for development, and staff is recommending approval.
That was easy.
It was easy, unless you have any
There's
questions.
also a public hearing on this, but before that, anybody have anything for Stephanie before we go?
So the plot that's up there is just orientated wrong, or?
Yes, yeah, it's just rotated.
Okay, with that, I'll open the public hearing. Anybody in the audience would like to step up to the microphone and address item 3.3, please do so at this time. Seeing no one, bring it back to the commission, close the public hearing. Mr. Reichert.
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Reichert, seconded by Mr. Lunsky. Discussion? Vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. 3-3 passes. Item 3.4.
Public hearing fast track final, replat of Lot E, Block 1 of the replat of Lot D, Block 1 of the replat of Lot 6, Block 1, Perkins First Edition.
Right.
All right.
Ms. Edwardson, please.
So another, in theory, simple replat with a little bit of a twist. This replat is the existing strip mall complex, TJ Maxx, the old Hornbachers, that complex. TJ Maxx is looking to split off and own their own parcel. Right now they are just leasing from the owner. They're looking to purchase their specific portion. And so your replat shows that this would be the TJ Maxx lot line. However, this replat is taking in this little portion, which then if I scroll back up is right about here. And the only reason that's an issue is because we don't allow lot lines to go over existing buildings or buildings in general, whether it's a new build or not. A little bit of a loophole in the system, if you'll follow me along that track, is that when this was all platted to begin with, these were two separate lots. When they decided to merge them all, the complex together, they joined the lots administratively to be able to build that connecting structure. So that line still exists today. It's just the legal description of this parcel is A plus B. So right now we're replatting A and splitting it off into these two portions, A1, A2, so to speak. A2 will then administratively be combined with B, and I'm not using the right lot numbers because I can't remember exactly what those are, but you're following along. And so we'll administratively put those together prior to the replat recording so that we ensure that a lot line doesn't remain. But it's our way of it, not slowing down the plat because they have a sale pending that we want to make sure facilitates. But we also get what we need to do to fill our requirements. So hopefully it's a little bit of a weird situation. We don't run into it often, but hopefully I explained it well. And if I didn't, please certainly ask some questions.
Mr. Buck.
So at the end of the day, then there will be 3 lots, basically?
So at the end of the day, even though this shows 3 lots,
yep,
this small one will be merged into this big one. So there will be 2.
Okay.
But to process this through, it has to be shown this way, and we'll correct it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I guess at this time I'll open the public hearing. Anybody in the audience would like to step up to the microphone, address item 3.4, please do so at this time. Seeing no one, that brings it, close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission.
So Andrew, why do we, I guess I can figure out why we discourage this. I mean, so why would we want to make an exception in this case?
We gave them 2 different options. We said you can either include this larger portion as part of the plat, or you can do this administrative process. Because surveying this much larger complex parcel would significantly add to their timeline, I believe they've chosen to do the administrative route. So we've told them there's an issue and gave them 2 options to correct it, and I believe they're going that route.
Any other questions, comments? Moved by Ms. Handy. Second by Mr. Johnson. Further discussion? Seeing no hands, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. 3-4 passes. Communications and preliminary approvals. We have one. 4-1.
So you all should have received the memo that I had sent out previously for the bylaws. The executive committee did meet and we went over pretty much from page 1 to the end and identified certain areas that we know need changing automatically. made some other procedural changes. So I think the intent tonight is just kind of not spend a lot of time, but walk you through it. If we have some discussion items, feel free. But I think the best way is just to start going down the line. Of course, we used to have 15 members. Now we're down to 9. So what I did, I just took what is already stated in city code, and instead of trying to reformat it or use other language, explains what it is with the 6 at-large members, the 3 extraterritorial members, and then the city engineer, ex officio non-voting member. When we get to B, we're choosing to eliminate this language because I think it had more so to do when we had school board and park board members. And really, the statement itself is just sort of, I hate to say it, but a no-brainer in terms of park board member, let's say, that was serving, didn't get reelected. That successor then, whoever they choose, would be appointed to the commission. So we're just trying to reduce some of the language that doesn't necessarily apply anymore. And please stop me at any point if you have any questions. Replacement of members, this is new. We didn't have anything prior to this, so right now this is sort of some placeholder language that the commission shall participate in the process of interviewing new candidates to fill vacated at-large positions. We're already doing that in terms of the past 2 rounds of interviews that a few of you that are up here now, that we did have the commission chair involved and as well as a city council member. So we're just going to basically take that and write it into the bylaws that this is the process that we take for future at-large members. If we go down under officers, some of the bigger changes that have happened over time, the commission several decades ago, I think by now, or at least a few decades, used to have its actual own budget in the overall city budget. At some point, probably of my predecessor's predecessor, they had taken that process out of the budgeting, and now there's no line item for the commission, just coming from the planning department. So we'll just take out a few things. The annual work program, the president shall act as an impartial moderator during the debate on all issues. So this is we're gonna kind of go back and forth with some of these items. Everybody on the commission is entitled to a vote to include the executive committee, the president, vice president, secretary. So how we discussed why we should remove that is the fact that if the chair is allowed to vote, in this sentence, if it stays in, shall act as an impartial moderator during the debate, we felt that that's sort of saying you can vote, but you really can't say anything. Now, other bodies, in terms of like the city council, the mayor is the breaks ties, otherwise doesn't, officially vote. Because this isn't an elected body, we think it's more appropriate that the chair should be able to talk about things and give his or her own opinion, but yet still be in charge of running the meeting. Under B, vice president, we read through this a number of times, and really it doesn't make sense. As it reads, and in the event the president shall automatically become commission president, then the position of vice president shall be deemed vacant, and the commission on and on and on. I think we understand what it was supposed to say, but the way it's written, I think it's what it says, that if the president no longer is president, then the vice president moves up, and then you elect, that vacated position. So we'll get that cleaned up to reflect that process. Letter C with the secretary. Unless Megan really wants to be in charge of keeping an official record of the meeting, give notice of public hearings, advertising, so on and so forth. I get what this is saying in terms of, as a body, this is what you're responsible for, but in reality, Megan, have you ever sent out a public hearing notice to the Herald? So anyway, I will be meeting with Howard after we go through these revisions, to just see if we can just change that wording to reflect what we actually do versus having this type of language. Letter D under the Executive Committee, where I have in yellow, the Executive Committee shall be responsible for interviewing prospective employees for the planning director's position. We changed that because, again, over time, without the budget, so some of these other changes to the commission, we decided we would not want to exclude the commission from the process, so we just changed it to reflect that the executive committee shall participate in interviewing prospective employees for the position. And then, of course, eliminated review of the Planning and Zoning Commission budget. Letter D under meetings, we took that out again since there's no budget. This refers to having an annual a board meeting at the cost of the commission. That doesn't exist, so. We also added on the basically the procedures of the meeting. We'd like to incorporate what we do with the city council, that at the end of the meeting, each commissioner is allotted, a few minutes to raise whatever points of concern, questions, just refer to it as commissioners' comments. And then we adjourn. And officially, and this is just something we'll get back into the practice of, when we do adjourn, then the chair will announce the time and day of the next meeting in terms of participation requirements and whatnot. Letter G, records. The commission shall keep a record of its resolutions, et cetera. Again, that's sort of the similar thought of what the secretary's duties are, so we're probably going to just reword that to clarify how that works. Then probably one of the more debated topics, not just with this body, but just in general, what to do with dissenting votes and abstentions. What we want to come to terms with is that if we have concurrence, when somebody does want to recuse themselves, we do follow the process of asking for a motion to recuse and providing the second and move on. We wanted to get that out to see if there are any thoughts or anything that somebody may see. Otherwise, there's really no clear, definite rules out there. I think if you read Robert's rules, I don't think it really gets into that level of specificity. But I think we should, as staff, I would recommend that we would go with making a motion to recuse in a second. But then the next step is, in terms of why you're asking to be recused, there's such a wide range of different procedural matters that you can look at where somebody, in some cases, has to say, I choose to recuse myself because X, Y, Z, the full-on gamut, versus just saying, I choose to recuse myself. That could be left for a little more discussion. I know that there's the city code, or the city council code of ethics. They have a certain process that they use. In discussing that with the city attorney, we may want to modify some of that language to reflect what the body wants to do. So I think my goal would be to come back after I meet with Howard to get sort of a final draft in front of everybody. And at that point, if we need to edit, make changes or whatever, at least we'll have a more firm document to work off of.
And Brad, the reason that I'm always against that, and I think I've articulated this, but in case I haven't, I just don't ever want to see a situation where the commission, for whatever reason, would vote that no, you can't recuse yourself, and then you're forced to vote on something that you personally feel you have a conflict with. So that's what I don't like about that process, is I don't think we can force somebody to vote on something if they have an objection to voting on it.
Right, and that's...
So I think just discuss that with Howard and make sure that there's some sort of out for that.
Mr. Matt?
Yeah, in all my years, I've never seen anybody ever ask why you're requesting not to vote on an issue. And I'm with Alex on this. I don't think you have to explain anything. If you feel you have a conflict of interest, that's enough. And I think this commission and the city council has always went ahead with what, you don't have to explain yourself why you're doing business with these people or whatever it is. So I think just the fact that you do it is the right thing to do. So, and I would hate to ever be challenged on why you did it.
There's one school of thought of why you would do the need to request, and it doesn't happen often, but just in general, hypothetically, if somebody just wanted to get out of voting on a really controversial topic, which from time to time, whether it's bridges or huge neighborhood issues, I think in part that's one reason, I guess, to maintain some control. I'm sure there could be other reasons as well. But
Actually voting no. So,
correct.
I mean, it's not like it just seems like it unnecessarily takes up time during the meeting that for something we just say, look, I'm recusing myself, and that's the way it is. But work it out with Howard, that's fine.
Yep. One thing that we'll continue to discuss as the with the executive committee under subcommittee chairpersons to council. This really hasn't been implemented for probably many years, but where it says chairpersons of all officially appointed subcommittees shall attend city council meetings with the planning director to represent the planning commission as adopted subcommittee reports. Again, it's nothing I guess I've ever seen that we do, but it certainly doesn't hurt to keep it in here. So if there's no issues, whether it stays or goes, I think maybe just leaving it as is could be sufficient. Just one housekeeping measure. Everywhere it says Planning and Zoning Commission after the first paragraph, I've just changed to Commission rather than repeating Planning and Zoning the whole time. Here's a little bit more on under letter B, 3, kind of what we're talking about. Abstain from voting and abstain completely from direct or indirect participation in any matter in which they have a personal interest. Again, I think that's typically what most of the commissioners would follow. If they recuse themselves, then typically they're not, an active part of the discussion. And I think that's probably appropriate to not, if you recuse yourself, to not necessarily weigh in, depending on what kind of influence that has, whether you're for something or against something. If you're not going to vote on it, by speaking to it, you could create a perception of basically expressing your opinion without. So we can further discuss that if anybody has.
Well, and one of the problems that I have with that is if I represent somebody, I may not even be able to say that I represent them. That would be an ethical violation for me.
If you were to have to state why you're recusing?
Yep.
Sure.
So.
I know at one point we had talked about if you do recuse yourself, and it happened in, former members of the commission all the time, then you were asked to get off your chair and go to the audience and be part of the audience conversation, not use your chair up here as your voice box too. I know we've done that from time to time. If that's still all right, that's kind of...
I think that's acceptable to some extent. So I guess that'll be at the discretion of the commission if you want to keep that format.
And we've had members, we wanted to ask questions, about the project or about whatever that the member happened to have great knowledge of.
Well, there's so many different scenarios of why somebody would recuse, whether they work for a company that has something or relative or financial stake or whatever the case is. And then we'll completely remove Roman numeral 10, personnel. Back in the day, the commission had some authority to appoint people to various positions, promotion, demotion, and removal of such officers and employees. Again, since that has changed procedurally, we'll gladly take that out. Yeah. So those are the main areas we wanted to discuss. One other point that came out of our meeting with the executive committee is that from a procedural standpoint, prior to the beginning of the meetings, and I think the mayor, city council operates somewhat under this, but you have sort of a preamble type from the chair, basically, you know, spelling out some of the procedural matters, you know, be mindful of your time and be mindful of others, and, you know, if you have something to say, you know, please don't repeat. So we'll come up with that little basic statement, and that applies obviously for the audience as well as the commission in terms of some of those things. So that I believe that's all we wanted to cover tonight on this. If there's any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Budke?
So there were a few instances here where we're striking out, you know, archaic language, things that have been essentially delegated or incorporated into the staff's duties. Is there any value in like listing those things, right?
In like basically
like clearly stating what if there's a role for the planning staff that is actually listed in here, or maybe I'm just overthinking it.
Well, we could certainly do that in terms of a bullet statement. Here's what's being taken out and here's why, if that's something the commission, a lot of it's going to be generalized. No budget, so therefore you can't hire people, you can't pay for X, Y, Z. So.
A lot of staff expectations are also listed in the land development code already.
Okay.
So that might be covered already. Of how we're supposed to process an application, or that sort of thing too.
Okay. Any other? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gingler. Any other reports from the planning department?
No more reports. Oh, yes.
One more big one.
Can't get out before 6. That's just not what we do. So the staff and I have put together an updated year-end report for you. Unfortunately, I didn't have it completely finished, so hopefully we'll refine it and get it out in an email maybe in a week or two, but wanted to run through the highlights of it with you. Just as a summary of what we've done in 2019 and some things to expect from us in 2020. We have Paula Lee. I believe there'll be a event for her later this month, I think. Okay, sounds good. He'll get to that. But then kind of highlighting your action from the last year, you acted on 89 different agenda items, 14 info reports, over 12 commission meetings with 4 subcommittee meetings for the year, 2 gravel or code change, and 1 sign sub and 1 park dedication. Those action items boil down to about 21 plats, only one of which was for a residential single-family development. We'll get into a little bit that in the housing section. A couple multifamily plats, a few more industrial and commercial, vacations, rezonings, appeals, annexations. We took in about 125 acres in 2019, and then some other miscellaneous stuff there. I won't go through all of it, but to give you the highlights, we'll give you an overview of boards that are given authority through the Land Development Code, Board of Adjustments and Downtown Design Review Board being those two. And we'll email it out so you'll be able to read it all, but we wanted to put these 2 in here because even though Board of Adjustments is a separate judicial final action body, they're given authority through the Land Development Code, which ties into what you're doing in terms of you do more of the larger scale residential, commercial, industrial, where they focus on the smaller single family duplex items, but all of it ties back to zoning and those different things. So we wanted to give you a report of what they've done. And then Downtown Design Review Board is just kind of an offshoot of architectural standards for downtown. Other boards, these boards don't take, not given authority in the Land Development Code, but these are boards that our staff is actively participating in and providing planning, education, and advocacy for to the groups. So I wanted to give you an update of what staff's out there doing and advocating for, or participating with different groups on.
In terms of site plans, unless there's a variance coming through, you guys don't see those. We do those administratively, so wanted to give you an update on what we've done there. We've approved 66 plans last year, the breakdown, and then major projects being Ultra Hospital, the Union, Border States, Acme expansion, Empire Townhouses, a few different other ones there. Giving you a little bit of an update on how we're doing site inspections now. And these are just general overviews of those major projects we've done, with the new hospital being one of the biggest ones last year. University obviously going through some big changes with the Cooley to Columbia Road reconstruction, Memorial Union, and then they're doing significant improvements with their steam plant as well. And while that's not a high profile, it's definitely a high expense and a key infrastructure project for them. So wanted to highlight that. Sign code updates, and then also some private development on campus with Greek housing. Expect to see in 2020 more projects from UND, with the College of Business potentially coming through. I know they're fundraising right now, and then additional Greek housing we're anticipating. Since the university's seen some redevelopment and public investment, I'm assuming Greek housing will take some private investment to go along with that. So anticipating that. Downtown, and you've probably heard quite often different downtown action plan stuff that we've gone through. Downtown parking study, also that we're going through design standards updates as part of that, and we'll be looking at updating the B4 zoning code next year. Construction was interesting this year for downtown with Selkirk and the Demers reconstruction. We also saw pure development in the grocery store, a much desired store element of the grocery store coming to downtown. A lot of downtowns hope for that and don't normally get that, and we're lucky enough to have one being built. So, but then also Epic Place, you may not have had much attention or heard much about that. That is the second floor above Ellie's Ivy. They reconstructed that, or rehabbing that to be a 7-unit apartments, market rate apartments. That second floor has been vacant for a number of years, and so even though it's a small project, additional units and taking advantage of vacant space downtown is something we wanted to highlight. Stephanie's worked on a couple different projects too for in terms of neighborhood involvement with the near South Side neighborhood traffic calming along Reeves Drive, as well as the 2020 census, which I'm sure we'll be hearing more of as we ramp up into that here in 2020. Then we get into some housing, different things. We track housing in terms of number of units permitted throughout the year for single family lots, as well as for the past 4 years or so, we've tracked how many platted lots we've done for single family to try to keep track of what's our current housing supply and demand in our stock, and can we adequately, are we doing platting enough to meet our demands? We try to get a handle on that, and this briefly goes over some of the action we've taken there. Engineering put these maps together maybe a year or so, and I'm still using them now, but they seem to still be accurate, so I'll get some good life out of them. But these kind of show different areas of where lots are available and where we're currently building, and we'll have some future discussions about where to build to next coming up in 2020, whether we go south or what that looks like. So gave an overview of that, and also residential also includes multifamily. We track how many units we're approving through administrative site plans and what we're platting. And the vacancy rate, we take the Grand Forks Apartment Association vacancy rate and judge kind of what our current multifamily apartment rates are and what we kind of need to see to keep up with current growth patterns. And we had a little bit of a downturn again with multifamily permits. We may see an upswing here in the next year or so, hopefully not to the extent that we saw in 13 and 14, but since we've kind of been on the downward trend, we'll probably get a couple projects here in the next year or two to bring that number up. Getting into communications, current project applications are online for you to view if you're interested in what site plans are out there. We went to digital agendas this year for the most part. That seems to have been going well and easier to read and zoom in and look at stuff. And then we also have that housing dashboard, which pretty much has the same information I've kind of went through in the housing sections, but that's updated if I get to it semi-annually, but it's out there. And then we went through the education of what we've done to continue your staff's knowledge in the planning field and some different opportunities with our state partners in the North Dakota Planning Association, trying to be more of a networked understanding of what's going on in the state and different things there. So with that, just generally what we're kind of thinking is on the work plan for 2020. Obviously the census, design standards, land use plan update will probably start mid-year. South End developments, continue that residential tracking, and then the site plans with UND projects and downtown will, among the other various things that'll come in and up. So with that, we'll refine it and get that narrative edited a little bit more to perfection, and we'll get it out within the next week or two. But wanted to run through with you kind of the highlights of 2019 and go from there. Any questions at all for me? Sounds good. Sounds good. See? You're welcome.
Yeah, I'll try to make this quick. Did we do anything with Viterra?
Did you get that last email?
No. Just for the commission's real quickness, Viterra is a large Canadian grain conglomerate that bought up Gavilon, which is a great big grain terminal that's on the north side of Grand Forks. And they're operating under a conditional use permit so they can load their unit trains of grain of 110 cars. And one of the conditions is when they block 54th, they have to have an alternate route that is open, because we have 8 residents that live on the end of 54th, and 54th dead ends at the interstate. So their only access is 54th. And when that's blocked, they have to open the alternate access, and they're supposed to put signage up, and they're supposed to have it open. Well, what's happened is since Viterra came in, they just block them both. They don't care. And they don't realize what they got to do. So I'm almost to the point of making a motion to call in that conditional use permit, because they need to either do it or we need to take it away from them. Because a conditional use permit is, that's what it is, to apply by it.
And I'll
go ahead.
Jump in. What Frank was describing, a situation where there was the 2 businesses or the 2 structures in this particular area, and the whole property was under one ownership, and the conditional use permit that was approved applied to the whole property. And then at some point over the years, it was replatted and split, so the conditional use permit now applies to the property that's not causing the problem. So having said that, that doesn't mean, irrespective of the conditional use permit, that what they're doing is dangerous and simply wrong. And I'm sure, you know, they may think, well, that was way before my time, I didn't agree to that. But it is kind of frustrating to think, and there's a lot of, you know, blaming that can go around in terms of the railroad versus the railroad's customers, which we hear quite a lot in terms of, you know, the Burlington gets your cars to where you need them, then they say now they're your cars, now you deal with them, and then when they're done with their process. So there's some details I think we should flush out. I mean, is there a legal recourse to take, even outside of the conditional use permit, if they're...
Has the city sent them a copy of the conditional use permit and say, at least then they know what they're up against?
I had a conversation with with Viterra, and of course they weren't aware of anything that had happened in the past, and that's when I found out, well, actually their property doesn't pertain to that permit that was issued anymore. So I think maybe more aggressive approach needs to be more than a phone call or a letter. I don't know if you've had any personal conversations with them.
I have a little bit, and I'll just say they're from a different country than the United States, so they look at things a little different than we do. They think they should basically be able to do that, and I tried to explain to them that they can't. My concern is there's 8 residences that are down on 44th, and if there's any kind of an emergency, fire, ambulance, whatever, they can't get there if that rail's blocked. Okay, They were given permission to block 54th with the proper signage, and they had to build an alternate access, and they did that. Or Gavilon did that. Let's go back a second. Gavilon was there before, and they did all of that, and they complied with the conditional use permit. These guys don't seem to really understand. And it's a bad situation if they're both blocked. The residents back there know how to get into their place if 54th is blocked. But when the second access is blocked, they have no way.
Right.
Is that PV that they use?
It used to be the PV, it's been 100 different names, grain companies.
That road that goes on the...
54th is a township road, it's just, it's a, 54th is the address of it.
I remember that permit coming up.
It dead ends right at the interstate, so there's no access from the west whatsoever.
Yep, I remember it.
But
I think they need a copy of the conditional use and what they have to deal with.
But it applies to these guys now.
Oh,
is what Brad's
and that's
saying.
What Brad's talking about is these chemical companies, these farm companies, they change hands so often it blows your mind. It was originally CPS and now it's Nutrin. And when they platted out, that land is still Viterra's or Gavilon's or whoever's still got it. You know, it's a mess sometimes where it's at, but.
So all the land is owned by the same?
Yeah, and
then it should apply to.
Well, the fertilizer company and a chemical company just have a lease for a long-term lease on the land.
Oh, I know.
And they actually don't use any rail cars whatsoever. They're all truck.
Okay.
In fact, they're a little upset because they can't get their trucks in either when the grain cars are filling the deal.
Sure.
And Brad's right about the railroad. When they drop off the cars, it's not the railroad's fault anymore. These guys got their own locomotives to move these cars and load them, and they usually do it over a weekend, you know. And the other problem is in the summer, it's not really a big problem because they can break the train. But in the winter, they say, oh, we can't because we got to air them up, and we can't air them all back up, and we can't keep them aired up to move them. That seems to be the main problems in the winter. So, but I think I'd like to research this, and if this conditional use does not apply to Viterra, I'd like to make a motion that we do call them in and set up a conditional use permit.
Or some other.
Well, yeah.
Are they conforming?
In terms of use, they are, because it was the fertilizer that was the trigger for the conditional use, opposed to, you know, grains and those types of things.
Well, I remember these people coming in and there was a semi-tractor trailer involved and couldn't park his or turn his around, and there was a bunch of things that the residents had brought into us at
right
time. And I thought we had this cured with that alternate road, if I remember right. It's been a while. And they were supposed to, you're right, I remember putting the correct signage up so that an ambulance, a fire truck, or whatever could get to you.
Right. The signs are all laying in the ditch. They're there. They're laying in the ditch. They never use them. But the problem came to head twice now that they've blocked both accesses.
How long do they block?
Overnight.
Oh.
There's 110 rail cars there. It takes a mile and a half almost to move them in and out.
Isn't there a general guideline?
Yes, on the rails, but they were given a conditional use permit as long as they had an alternate access.
Wasn't related to the conditional use, though. I mean, the conditional use was for fertilizing.
But I mean in general.
They're breaking some other laws.
Right.
I think what happened
So
is
then you're almost at a sheriff's
the conditional
department
use
issue.
permit got
Not
hung up on
planning
the replat somehow, and it should have been strictly with the grain elevator.
We tied as much as we could to the conditional use, but yeah, they're separate owners, so.
Yep.
I think what Brad's saying is the one who's blocking doesn't have a conditional use, has no ability to.
Well, then we should get one for them, because it.
Well, I think it would be.
But if their use is conforming, how can we can't force that on them. I mean, I think the issue is with the sheriff's department. I mean,
Is the road in the city limits? Or is it out?
It's outside.
It's outside.
But it's in
our jurisdiction, but it's outside.
I think the sheriff's got an issue with it more.
Yeah, I think this would be a sheriff's department issue.
So, you know, the conditional use permit wouldn't be the vehicle necessarily, but all these other things we're talking about, and, you know, in legal terms, as far as can they legally do this? And I think those are the types of questions, or if they can legally do them, how can we force them not to do it?
Is there verbiage in the county law about blocking roads?
I think there's federal mandate.
Then we need to find that, or someone needs to take care of that.
That's federal.
That's gotta be your teeth, I think, on this.
Is it? You're looking at it right there on your phone.
Google it.
Google it.
But the thing is here, they have to comply and use the alternate access. I've got 8 houses over there in my township, and those people have no absolute way to get out. The guy had to get out, he went across the field in a 4-wheel drive pickup, and he barely made it to get out.
So did you tell them to call the sheriff? I mean, I think that's where
They've done that, and it's basically back to, well, they're supposed to provide the access. And the access is there, they have it. Gavilon built the access, and it's a gated access. So it's only open when they need it. But what's happening now is they're blocking both of them
With train cars.
with rail cars, 110 unit rail cars. And then what happens is when they're loading them, they need a place to stash the loaded ones, so they just keep pulling them out.
Was that something, Brad, you can dig into and kind of fill us in with an email?
I think we need to get more parties involved.
I do too. I
Outside
really
of
think this
our
is
circle.
something that we need.
10 minutes.
What happens too is that
Overnight.
the sheriff, you can call the sheriff and they're blocked, and nobody knows who to even get a hold of.
Right. That's what, it
Because-
needs to be handled during business hours so that you get to the right people that
Because
are
most of the cars-
decision makers.
At the office have Manitoba license plates,
Right.
and they're gone for the weekend.
That's what I said. It's got to be a phone call made during business hours where you can talk to somebody and that can make some decisions and get this
Well,
cured
I
up.
just wanna-
I
I
feel
just
sorry
want
for
us
the
to put-
residents also.
I want us to put some kind of a teeth into this thing so they can't do that and get
Well-
away with it.
What Megan's showing me here, it's a Class B misdemeanor for them to do it, so start throwing them in jail, that'll stop them.
Slow.
I will let you handle that, Mr. Gingler.
Well, that's fine
Since
if
I
you
think
want-
the
if you wanna do that-
commission's,
If you want to press the issue of the 10-minute rule and then make them break the cars, I don't have a problem with that.
Well, therein lies the issue, that they're just choosing, and I assume it's Burlington, or the railroad itself, that's choosing not to decouple, according to one source.
When they buy a train and it gets there, it's theirs. They have their own locomotives to move them.
Okay.
BNSF is gone. They bring the train in and they're gone.
I'd like to thank our attorney team for bringing light to misdemeanor, and I think that would be the route you go.
Absolutely.
I don't really know what we could do more than that. It's,
Well, we had originally gave them a conditional use permit and the city council went with it. And the trouble is it got buried somehow when the lot line was changed for the fertilizer company.
But we can't change that now, Frank.
Right.
We could still, we could still require, we could require a conditional use permit from them.
If they want to block it for more than 10 minutes, we would then have to give them a conditional use permit. Right?
Which
Well,
is
the
what
con-
we originally
yeah,
did.
the
which is what
conditional
we
use
originally
permit
did.
isn't the vehicle that we're using, because that's tied to the use of the land. and
Right.
The use of the land is permitted. However,
Okay.
I think there's a ton of other things, or a handful, that we need to pursue. Again, getting more parties involved. I'd like to have a good conversation with the sheriff's office to see
that would be where I would start.
what's proper for them to do, and
Yeah, you take a break the lots of torts, you can just sue them.
And you can't wait till it's blocked off, like you said, that's too late. And then you're calling people that have no idea and can't make a decision to unhook cars, can't do anything. Give the sheriff's office a call, get this handled during business hours where you get a hold of somebody that can make some difference. I think that'd be,
Okay, I think they're working under the premise that somebody had a conditional use permit to block the road.
I don't think
But they didn't, we can't give that, because Century Code is saying that you can't, we don't have the authority to tell someone they can block a rail.
no, with the,
Oh,
yeah, I didn't know either.
but I think what was the intent, what was
Simple thumbs
approved was that, sure, 54th could be blocked, but the alternate route needed to be
Right,
open.
right.
But never both blocked at the same time, which is what the problem is.
We were part of the vehicle to get the alternate route established. we are not a part of vehicle to govern it, is, I think, Frank. I mean, I agree with you. I want them opened. I don't want to see them blocked. We gave them the alternate route and gave them that language, and they put it, Gavilan put it in. Now I think it's up to the authorities to enforce that. I don't know if we can. I may be wrong.
And also,
Call me, we'll sue 'em.
There you go.
in addition to the sheriff's office, I think we also need to get some heavy input from the other emergency responders. I mean, if we're gonna approach them in one shape, way, or form, I think we need to have all those people up front getting appointed.
Well, especially if we have residents that think it's our responsibility. I mean, we should clarify that to them. I think that's fair.
Okay, anything else? Thanks, Mr. Matchek, for bringing that up. That is important. Very much so.
Nothing else?
Nothing else? Have a motion to adjourn this thing?
Move to adjourn.
So moved. Meeting adjourned. Next meeting will be a month from now.
Shoot a picture of that.
Thank you for being with us tonight. This meeting has been brought to you in part by
Let Grand Forks International Airport help you start your next vacation off on the right foot. Grand Forks International Airport offers flights to the sunny destinations of Orlando, Las Vegas, and Phoenix on Allegiant, and connections anywhere in the world through Minneapolis-St. Paul on Delta. Forget the hassle of long drives, parking nightmares, and stressful check-ins. The convenience of flying locally means less headaches and more time for you. Grand Forks International Airport. Your airport. Simply grand.
Know what's in this box? Well, in case your crystal ball is broken, here's a hint. Safe, reliable energy, for starters, but there's also a commitment to this community. See, at Xcel Energy, this is our hometown. So we're not just about making a living here, we're about living here. Oh, I wish I had wings.
In our community, we're always delivering. Xcel Energy, responsible by nature.
Brantley Gilbert returns to Grand Forks. Fired Up Tour 2020 with special guests Chase Rice and Brandon Lay. Alara Center, Saturday, May 2nd. Get tickets now at Ticketmaster.com. The brand new album Fire and Brimstone drops everywhere October 4th. Brantley Gilbert, live in concert. Check more at BrantleyGilbert.com.